Amazon dropped a full cast, a first look image for the God of War series, and everyone lost their mind. The original creator called it terrible, fans are calling it cosplay, and I've got a lot of thoughts. Stick around, this one's worth your time. What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Tanveer Talks. And I am Tanveer, and today we are going deep. I mean, deep on one of the most talked about, most hyped, and honestly most argued over video game adaptation in production right now. The Amazon Prime Video is a God of War series. Now I know that's some of you are thinking. Like, hey, we've been burned before, right? Remember Halo? Remember the Witcher situation? Yeah, it's fair. But here's the thing. This one kind of feels different. And today I'm going to tell you exactly why and also where the legitimate concerns are. And I'm not here to hype train you without giving you the full picture. We've got a forecast list, a first look image that broke the internet for better or worse, and creative team that includes names attached to some of the best prestige TV of the decade, right? For the last decade. So buckle in, we're breaking all of it down. And let's start with the production itself. Because the scale of this thing is generally impressive. Filming is underway right now in Vancouver, Canada. And Amazon hasn't just, dipped a toe in. They've cannonballed. They've already committed to a two-season order, right? With season 1 and 2 shooting back to back. The filming window runs from February 2026 all the way through till April 2027. So this year and the next year they'll be filming it, and that is over a year of continuous production, right? So this tells me that the Amazon level of investment here, right? They are honestly fully dived in it. But honestly, like, what excites me more than the budget is the creative DNA attached to this show. Like, let's talk about the people actually running this. The showrunner is Ronald D. Moore, and if that name doesn't immediately ring a bell, let me give you his resume. This is the man behind the reimagined Battlestar Galactica, one of the greatest sci-fi shows ever made, right? And he also created Outlander, which ran for 8 seasons and built an absolutely loyal audience. Moore isn't some hack who got a handed of franchisee just to cash in on. He's actually a storyteller who knows how to build worlds that people get emotionally invested in over the long haul, right? Like, that matters honestly a lot for a property like God of War, which lives and dies on its emotional weight. If you played the games, you know how the latest game, obviously, how people invested in those games were, right? How awesome those games are. And the directing of the first 2 episodes is gonna be Frederick E.O. Toy. And if you've been watching Prestige TV lately, you know that name. He also just picked up an Emmy for his work on Shogun. He also worked on The Boys and the Fallout series, both of which are exactly, the tone reference point you'd want for a show like this. Action heavy, but never, hollow. Violent, but purposeful, right? So here's the thing about having Prestige TV talent at the helm of the video game adaptation. It signals that the intent. They're saying that we're not just making a 2-hour action spectacle stretched across 8 episodes. It's telling us that we believe this story deserves the same craft and care as the best television being made right now. And honestly, that's a big deal. All right, let's get into the casting, because this is where things get really interesting and where the community has had the most to say. As you know, the first casting that was confirmed was Ryan Hurst as Kratos. And I think this is a fascinating choice on multiple levels. If you played God of War Ragnarok, you remember that, Hurst actually provided the voice and the motion capture for Thor. And I loved him as Thor in that game. I've played that game and I was honestly amazed. And I think he's going to be a great antagonist in this game universe, right? To actually, lead this entire live action franchise, because he actually was in the game and, knows a lot about this God of War, right? I think it's amazing, right? From the image that we've seen, there's been circulating the image, the new teaser image, I would say, the early image. I would say that has been, all over the internet right now, right? Is like, he looks much leaner than Kratos, we know from the games, right? The video game Kratos, is absolute unit. He looks like someone built like a Greek god out of pure granite. And, then they gave him anger issues. Hurst is big, but he's not that big. And like, I think you cannot have a 1-to-1 for this because it's a game, first of all, and you're adapting a game into a live action. I don't think you can get as close to game, but somewhat close is still good enough, I would say. And Hurst physicality might actually, serve that version of the character better than, trying to CGI. Someone looking into like the game adaptation, basically. And here's something, something that hasn't been get talked about a lot. I just want to give Gary Ways to you. Ryan Hurst is a Sikh. He's a converted Sikh. And as I said previously, when the state of play revealed, right, I at that time also said his Sikh name was Gobind Seva Singh, right? You can also see it as in Instagram bio, right? In Sikhism, uncut hair, the Kesh, in the one of the 5 Ks, one of the articles of faith, you have to keep it. You cannot cut your hair, right? And it's deeply spiritual to him. So the fact, that Amazon actually choose to, put Hurst in a ball cap rather than asking him to shave is actually a lot to say. And I know people are wondering, why couldn't they just hire someone who will do actual job, who will actually shave it? The thing is, whoever they hired him to this job, and if they think it's okay to have him with the ball cap and they can CGI it later, or perfectly using VFX, I think that's perfectly okay. That's the studio being generally respectful, right? Studio, I don't think nowadays the CGI is really good. We know that VFX has come a lot, right, since the early days, right? They can literally, honestly, make that ball cap look like a real head, right? And as a Sikh, that's like a big achievement. Like, that opens up a more doorway. Okay, Hollywood is actually considering people who actually, cannot cut their hair because of spiritual reasons and, what their religion is. And studios are saying, okay, we are okay with it. As long as your acting is good, they're okay. And I think that's perfect. And that opens up, even though he's not South Asian, he's not actually from the area, he's a converted Sikh. So even then, he's opening up more doorways to people like us, right, in Hollywood. With more people who can, act. They don't have to cut their hair if they want to play a different character. They can do whatever, right? Hollywood saying that, just telling you that they care about acting rather than what their hair or what physical transformation they can do, right? Of course, like if the actor is gonna put the work to be, be a bodybuilder, like the job requires you to have a big body, of course he's gonna, at least put on certain pounds and be active, go to gym, get that physique, a close to physique, not like an exact physique, because at the end of the day they're gonna use VFX to perfect that physique, right? And it'll look good. The image, even the ball cap in the first image, looks not that good, but it's the first shot, right? It's probably testing. It's probably a screen test, But I think Ryan Hurst can carry Kratos. They probably can, put a little bit more fluff on his beard, because his beard is not that big. His beard is like small, right? Maybe they can put more hair, or maybe use VFX to add more fluffiness to his beard. I think that would be good enough. But I think at the end of the day, if he's good, let's see what the trailer shows, right? Once the trailer comes out, once they're ready to show something, the actual, production, because the production just started, so they are actually filming right now, right? And let's see what when they do a first teaser of the show, actual first teaser with actually, lines and dubbed and everything, we'll know how it looks like. Until then, I don't think we should be making assumptions on just because from the first image that came, right? And it was not even an actual image that's gonna be probably used in the show. It's just a screen test. So the next casting I'm gonna talk about is the Callum Vinson. He's playing as Atreus. He's playing the 10-year-old Atreus, right? He doesn't have a huge list of characters, right? He's only 10 years old. I don't think, probably has like a few, not a lot, right? But let's see. I think he's gonna be great. Let's see, because I haven't seen him acting at all, so I don't know how he acts. Let's see how this 10-year-old. I think they should have casted like a 12 or 13 years old, but it's fine. But the Atreus casting is as critical, as Kratos. So if Ryan Hurst is good, if you've seen Sons of Anarchy, if you've seen Walking Dead, he's amazing in those, right? His screen presence is like he can carry, emotionally, like he's terrifying in those, shows. So, and I hope Atreus can match the actual Atreus from the games, because that was amazing, right? That trace was amazing. And the next one I want to talk about is the Odin casting, which is Mandy Patinkin, right? I think that's how you pronounce it, right? If you grew up on Princess Bride, you probably know him. I haven't watched Prince, so I don't know, right? So for me, this is the same as Atreus. I don't know. I haven't seen this guy act before, so from the looks of it, he looks good as Odin. I think it's a perfect casting because of physically looks, right? And as you know, Odin is not some physically, imposing warrior king. He's basically a manipulative and paranoid patriarch, So basically, you can think less like a battle commander and more of a dangerous person in the room who never raises his voice, basically. And Patinkin can do that in his sleep, from what I heard. So I think he can deliver. I don't have no doubt in this casting because he looks the part. And for Thor, they got Ólafur, right? Ólafur Darri Ólafsson, and I think he's a perfect cast as well. Like the body and the build, and even from the face, like it looks amazing, right? He looks like you can believe him as a Thor. And if you played the game Ragnarok, and he looks exactly the part, right? And he's not the Marvel Cinematic Universe Thor. Like the Ragnarok teaser came out for the game itself, everyone's like, "What is this? This Thor does not look like actual Thor," and people were comparing him to the MCU Thor, and people don't know that this Thor, Ragnarok Thor, was actually more closer to the Norse god Thor than the MCU Thor. So the fan base, they think they should cater to one fan base, right? I think this casting is good too. For me, I don't judge anything beforehand. I always judge something after it releases, right? I don't judge anything beforehand, and I will not do any judging right now. I think it looks good. I will not say anything until any trailers or any teaser or even first episode of the show comes out, right? Trailer can tell you a lot how the series is going to be, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. The next one is Heimdall, who is Max Parker. He's described as Heimdall is described as a handsome and dynamic god who feels chronically underappreciated. If you played the game, right? If you remember Heimdall from the games at all, he's like generally one of the most insufferable characters in the game, and I actually mean it, right? Like he is insufferable. Like I wanted to kill him right away, as when Atreus goes up and meets him. I was like, he's unbearable. When you're trying to beat him, he's like, the thing is, he cannot it looks like he sees the future. He doesn't see the future. He sees the intent of what you're gonna do next. And he was arrogant, like just itching for a fight. And then as Kratos, spoiler alert, and you kill him, it feels really good after, like you really got him. I hope Max Parker, Heimdall is amazing. And if you know Sif, Sif is the Teresa Palmer. She's gonna play Sif, and Sif is described as a subscriber navigating the cruelties of Asgard. And you don't actually know what Sif deals with. Being married to Thor, and if you play the game, you know how is you feel actually bad for her, right? But I would say the Palmer is really a good choice. And the next one is Balder. Ed Skrein is gonna play him. He was from the first game, the 2018 game. If he just wants to fight because he cannot feel anything. And the character description I would lean into is like he's brawling and unpredictable energy, right? And Green has actually played villains before, and he's good at projecting that sense of someone who could snap at any moment, and he's a perfect choice for Balder as well. And let's see how that pans out, how he goes about it. In the game, he was perfect. And the next one is Mimir, and this is one of the most boring casting, is Alistair Duncan. He is the actual Mimir. So basically, in the games, Alistair Duncan plays him. In the show, Alistair Duncan is gonna play him, and I am happy that they did not change him, because it's Mimir. He's just a talking head. Probably just need to have his face, and they can just CGI him, and probably they don't even need him to be most of the time. Only time that they would need him, his whole thing probably would be, his whole self probably would be when he's like on the tree, right? Once Kratos gets him out of the tree, goes to revive him, the only thing remains is his head. Yeah, I think it was the perfect choice. I don't think nobody could ever play better Mimir than Alistair Duncan, and I'm really relieved, and and the fan community is, even nobody has complaints about it, honestly. Okay, that was all about the cast. Now let's get into the real controversy, because the casting debates are almost secondary to this one. Where does the show start? And the answer is the Norse era, right? Specifically, is adapting the 2018 game, not the old Greek games, right? And the showrunner Ronald D. Moore has been very upfront about this decision. He is drawn to the father-son story at the heart of the modern game, so he wanted to capture that emotional texture of the Kratos teaching his son to be a better god. So while Atreus simultaneously teaches his father to reconnect with his humanity, right? So this inciting event of the show will mirror the game. The death of the Kratos' wife Faye and the journey of the Jotunheim to scatter ashes at the highest peak of the Nine Realms. That would be, I would say, the first season. I get why Moore was drawn to this. As a piece of pure storytelling, the 2018 game is extraordinary. The hype was, the game was introduced, when God of War actually was introduced, the hype was amazing. People went crazy over it. I was there, watching the live stream. I was amazed of the introduction of God of War 2018. It was pure, genuine, moving. When you played it, and I played it, it was the story-wise, the gameplay-wise, completely different from the Greek saga, but it was amazing. It was genuinely moving material. But here's the legitimate criticism from the fan community. I think it deserves a real answer rather than just being dismissed. The Ghost of Sparta era, the original Greek trilogy, the original Greek trilogy, is where the Kratos character is forged. This is the man who was consumed by rage and grief and murdered the god of war and took his title, and who tore off the Helios's head off to use it as a lantern. He literally ripped open the chest of his own father, Zeus. The scale of what Kratos did in Greece is almost incomprehensible. He didn't just fight, gods, he just killed them all. He ended the mythology. He ended the whole, everyone. Every single Greek god was killed. And then the reason this matters for the Norse saga is, Norse saga is actually the redemption, right? The weight of what Kratos is trying to move away from is directly proportional to the weight of everything he did before. So if you don't know what he's running from, and can you really feel the significance of him trying to walk a different path? The new viewers coming in cold might find him compelling, but long-time fans argue, they're being asked to accept a shortened version of his journey. And Moore has also indicated that Kratos' past will surface through flashbacks, through Kratos reluctantly opening up to Atreus about what he's done, through the conversations that they will have on the road. Whether that lands with the same weight as actually witnessing the Great Saga is the real open question, right? Personally, I think it can work, but it's going to take very 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 careful writing to make sure the darkness of his past feels present and real, even without depicting it in full. So my advice is to the writers, especially don't sanitize it. Don't let Kratos talk about his past in vague, comfortable terms. Let the horror of it land. Let Atreus react to it honestly. That's where the drama actually lives. I want to see how he communicates, how he tells his past. I want to see that. And now let's move to that image that everyone's talking about, right? Because Amazon released the first official still, right, of Ryan Hurst and Cal Vinson's in costume as Kratos and Atreus, and the reaction was honestly let's call it spirited. Some fans generally loved it. The costumes are clearly they were game accurate. The red war paint and the bear cloak for the Atreus, all of it was very faithful to the source material. But some people in the community looked at it and said this looks like a cosplay, high quality cosplay, but cosplay nonetheless. And they didn't like the ball cap, as I said before, right? And yeah, I understand it. Right? There's a version of this conversation where it looks like the games is a compliment, but when you're doing a live action, right, look exactly like the game can sometimes translate, look theatrical in a way that breaks, immersion. And the person who made the most noise about this was David Jaffe, the original creator, obviously, for the God of War. The man who actually built the franchise from back in 2020, back in 2005. Jaffe put out a video about 7 minutes long where he was pretty direct about his feelings on the photo. He called it, and obviously paraphrasing here, dumb and terrible, and made a comparison about the pose that I'll let you Google yourself if you haven't seen it. But here's what interesting, right? Jaff was also very careful to separate his reaction to the photo from his feelings about the show. He said, Ronald D. Moore is, in his words, awesome, and that he has no doubt the show is going to be good. His concern was purely about that one image, right? Obviously, the marketing choice, the staging, is actually a pretty important distinction. One awkward promotional photo does not mean, bad show in the making. And there's also been a conversation about that some people are calling it a soft masculinity approach to this version of the show, right? Meaning that emphasis less on Spartan rage and pure physical power and more on emotional complexity, fatherhood, and vulnerability. Some fans love this direction, and others feel that it's a dilution of what made Kratos iconic in the first place. I think both reactions are understandable. This is a character, whose identity has generally evolved over 20 years of storytelling, and not everyone has, come along for every step of that journey. My read, honestly, is just trust the process, man. Trust more. One promotional image is not a verdict. And, every time a prestige video game adaptation gets announced, people immediately reach for two reference points: The Last of Us and, the Fallout. And honestly, that's fair. Like, those are probably the gold standards. For Last of Us, season 1 was good, right? And if if you watch Last of Us, because Neil Druckmann actually wrote the game, so he understood how the character, he gave his blessings, he gave consultancy to Craig and his team, and they did strip away some of the gameplay mechanics and deepen some emotional beats, right? Let the relationship between Joel and Ellie breathe, and result was actually good for the most part, right? And then Fallout actually worked for different reasons. It was less of a direct adaptation, right? More of a love letter to the world and the tone of the games. It created new characters while, honoring the mythos. And it nailed the darkly comedic, morally ambiguous atmosphere that makes that franchise feel like nothing else. And honestly, God of War has elements of both of those approaches available to it, right? Like Last of Us, its emotional core is parent-child relationship tested by an unforgiving world. And like Fallout, it has an incredibly rich mythos, 9 realms worth of gods, giants, dwarfs, and creatures. That and a TV format can actually do more justice to it than a single game. In game, obviously you control the character, but I think in a TV format, it can obviously they probably have to just skim some of the fightings, right? But I'm excited what happens next, right? Now the question is which failure modes it needs to avoid, right? Last of Us's second season faced the most scrutiny for creative choices around the characters, right? And Halo showed us, what happens when showrunners treat source material as a suggestion rather than a foundation. And I hope God of War, does not do that, and otherwise it'll lose the community very, very, very early. And fans are deeply invested, deeply knowledgeable. They do not actually shy about making their feelings known. And with more at the helm, I'm cautiously optimistic. But his track record suggests someone who understands that the genre material, the gods, the monsters, the epic battles, they only work when it's grounded in characters we basically generally care about. Now let's be real about what we don't know yet, right? But because there's still a lot. We don't have a trailer, as I said, and we're probably not gonna get it soon, right? Amazon might bring some behind the scenes to the San Diego Comic-Con in the summer, but I don't know if they're gonna come, but let's see, because that will be probably one of the best places, logical place to generate more buzz about it and let people know that this is coming, this is what we're doing. And the premiere isn't expected until late 2027. Remember they're filming like all the way through April of that year, right? Which means post-production, effects, work, sound design, marketing, all that still need time. So we're gonna be waiting for this show for a while. So. And also, we don't know how much of the episode count is going to be, like specific story structure, how much of the game's 2018, the original one, have like how much they plan to cover across the first season, right? Versus carrying it to season 2, right? Like season 1, is the season 1 going to be just one game, or season 1 is going to be half of the game? Like, we don't know yet, right? Because they already did a 2-season order. To me, it looks like they're thinking about it for longer. They're planning it to, okay, let's do like a one game in multiple seasons, rather than rushing it to the finale. So yeah, let's see, and we haven't heard about, whether the show plans to incorporate any storylines from Ragnarok yet. We don't know anything. I am gonna be, looking at all any future footage and interviews, and gonna maybe let's see if the show feels like has a general perspective, not just a game, right, but live action, right? And movie has the credibility, so let's see what happens. And so where does all of this leave us, right? Amazon's God of War series has every ingredient for success. a prestige showrunner with real credentials, right? A director fresh off an Emmy win, a cast that, on paper makes a lot of sense for these characters, a 2-season commitments, which signals like Amazon is serious, and the source material that at its core tells one of the most compelling stories in modern gaming. The concerns are real but manageable. Skipping the Greek era is a storytelling gamble that will let us know if it was a smart writing or if it pays off or not, right? And Ryan Hurst casting is can he carry the emotional weight physically and emotionally, right, for Kratos? And the community skepticism and earned by years of bad adaptations is not going to disappear because of just a 2-season order, right, and a famous showrunner. But here's the thing: we're living in an era of prestige video gaming adaptation. Last of Us opened the door, Fallout kicked it out wider, and if God of War can deliver on its potential, we're looking at one of the defining genre stories of the decade. And is Ryan Hurst the right Kratos? I think so, but he has to show us that he is. And are we okay with skipping the Greek era? I think we can be, if the writing is honest about what the Kratos has done and recast. Right, let's see what happens. And we will not know if they passed or not until 2027. And until then, watch this space. I'll be covering every update. Like whenever a trailer drops, I'll be doing a reaction to it. And just watch my show and we'll be talking about it. We're talking about all the casting choices. We'll probably do a final when they release all the casting, everything they do. If any promotion material comes in, just watch this space. I'll do the review. I'll do a reaction to it. And before I let you go, if you got something out of this episode, do me a solid, subscribe wherever you are listening from or watching right now. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and drop a comment below. I want to know, are you hyped for the God of War series or are you still in wait and see mode? Find me on YouTube as Tanveer Talks Official and my name Tanveer Ramgarhia, and on Spotify as Tanveer Talks. And if you want to follow along between episodes, catch me on X, Twitter at PunjabiGamer786. Links are in the description. And that's it for episode 11. Until next time, take care. Peace.